If you've ever discovered something you were never supposed to see and had to choose between breaking down or building a new life, this story is for you. Subscribe for more true-feeling stories of betrayal, strength, and silent redemption. And comment below. What would you do if you saw the truth through a camera lens? My name is Natalie, and I thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect, but good. We had a mortgage, a toddler who said, "I love you" with peanut butter still on his face, and a shared Google Calendar. He was the type of man who kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work, who thanked me for dinner, even on nights when it was just leftovers. I never thought to question that, until the day I installed the camera. It started with little things: jewellery not where I left it, the baby's bottle not rinsed, a general unease. We had a maid, Maria, who came in 3 times a week. She was kind, quiet, and had been with us for over 2 years, but something felt off. So I bought a small camera, disguised it as a smoke detector, positioned it in the hallway, facing the entryway, the kitchen, places Maria passed through most. It wasn't about mistrust, it was about peace of mind. I got anything but. The second night after installation, I sat in bed with my laptop and opened the footage. Nothing unusual at first. Then, around 1:14 p.m, after I had left with my son for daycare and errands, I saw it. My husband came home. Early. He wasn't supposed to be there until 5. He walked in casually, checked his phone, paced once. Then the door opened again. It wasn't Maria. It was Sarah, my sister-in-law, his brother's wife. I froze. She walked in like she belonged there. He didn't greet her awkwardly. He didn't act surprised. He smiled. That smile. The one I used to get when I wore his favourite blue dress. And then he kissed her, not hesitantly, like it was a habit, like it had been happening for a long time. I sat there, jaw clenched, eyes burning, and I watched as my marriage unravelled in grainy 1080p footage. They talked, laughed, held hands, and then disappeared from the camera's view, into the bedroom. My bedroom. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there. Still. Then I watched it again. Twice. Because part of me still wanted to believe I misunderstood. That this was some cruel, cinematic mistake, but it wasn't. It was the truth. Raw, unedited, undeniable. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream. I kissed our son goodnight, brushed my teeth, laid in bed beside a man who had just betrayed me in the most unforgivable way, and he didn't even know I knew. He kissed my shoulder in his sleep, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering when exactly my life had stopped belonging to me. The next morning, I packed a bag, diapers, pyjamas, my laptop, one framed photo of me holding our son the day he was born, and I left. No note, no dramatic exit, just gone. The morning I left, I didn't even take my wedding ring off. I just slipped it into my coat pocket like it was a receipt I no longer needed to explain. I took our son, Liam, still half asleep in his dinosaur pyjamas, and drove without a destination. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than I realised until my knuckles ached. The city passed in grey and gold streaks. Everything looked normal, familiar, but nothing felt that way anymore. I ended up at a hotel 30 minutes outside town. One of those places where the air smelled like bleach and the hallways felt too wide. I used a fake last name at the desk. I wasn't afraid he'd come looking. I just didn't want to be found. Not yet. Not until I figured out who I was again. In the hotel room, Liam curled up beside me, still unaware his entire world had shifted. I watched him breathe. I studied the softness of his eyelids, the little freckle on his left cheek. He was the only thing I was sure of now. He was still mine, and I made a promise to him right there. I would never let him grow up thinking love meant tolerating betrayal. I stayed in that hotel for a week. I called into work, said there was a family emergency. That much was true. I just didn't say it was my family. I spent every nap time and every late night hour looking for rentals, childcare, anything to give me a foundation. I called a friend, From college I hadn't spoken to in years. She ran a small design firm. I asked if she needed help. "I thought you had the perfect life," she said, surprised. I let out a quiet laugh. "So did I." She gave me a shot. Remote work, project-based, flexible hours. Not glamorous, but it paid. And more importantly, it was mine. I found a small apartment 2 towns over. Old carpet, second floor walk-up, but it had light, big windows. A kitchen with room for a high chair, a place to begin again. Liam adjusted better than I expected. He missed his toys, his room, his dad, but children are far better at adapting than adults. He only asked once, "Why aren't we home?" I crouched beside him. "Because this is our home now." He tilted his head. "Is Daddy coming?" My throat closed. "No, baby," I whispered. "Not this time." He didn't cry. He just nodded, like he already knew. I didn't talk to my husband. He didn't know where I was. He called, texted, left voicemails that started with confusion, then urgency, then guilt-laced pleas. "Natalie, please, come home, let's talk." I ignored them, because I had seen everything I needed to see. There was no talk to be had, just space to be created, and filled with something better. 3 months passed. I worked, I built, I learned to live with less, and somehow feel more alive. I stopped flinching at shadows, stopped checking my phone for his name. I started running again, not far. Just enough to feel the strength coming back to my legs. I went to therapy. At first, I only talked about Liam. Then I talked about me. How I had made myself small for years, thinking compromise meant shrinking, thinking loyalty meant silence, thinking being a good wife meant swallowing discomfort until it calcified into resentment. And how I had ignored my own voice for so long, it no longer knew how to speak until betrayal gave it back. My therapist asked me once, "What would justice look like for you?" I sat with the question, then said softly, "Success." She raised an eyebrow. Not legal revenge, not lawsuits, not dragging their names through mud. Just me, standing on my own, flourishing. Because I didn't want him to suffer. I wanted him to watch me rise. By month 5, the design firm asked me to come on full-time. They gave me a team, a real title, a raise. I accepted. And that night, after putting Liam to bed, I made a cup of tea, sat on the floor of our little living room, and cried. Not because I was sad, because I finally realised I had done it. I had built something from nothing. Not because he lifted me, but because he dropped me, and I landed on my feet. I didn't speak to Sarah, not once. Not even when she sent a message that said, "You weren't supposed to find out like that. I never meant for it to go so far." I didn't reply, because going so far was the only thing she'd ever meant to do. Her silence had been just as calculated as her betrayal, and I refused to give her the dignity of forgiveness before I was finished healing. 6 months after I left, I ran into him. Grocery store. Frozen food aisle. He looked thinner, haggard, unshaven. He froze when he saw me. I kept walking, but he stepped in front of the cart. "Natalie," he said, voice low. "Please, can we talk?" I looked at him. Really looked, and saw not the man I married, but the man who made his choices and now had to live with them. "I already did," I said, and pushed the cart past him. That night I wrote in my journal, "There's a kind of power in not needing to prove you were right. In knowing." That walking away was the speech, that silence was the reply, and your new life was the loudest no you ever said. Success doesn't announce itself with confetti. It's quiet. It's in the mornings you show up to your own life without dreading the day. It's in the moments you walk past a mirror and don't wince. It's in the way your child starts smiling. More, sleeping deeper, hugging longer. By the time Liam turned 4, we had a rhythm. He loved scrambled eggs and lining his dinosaurs up by size. I loved my work, my calendar full, my inbox overflowing with people who wanted my ideas. Wanted me. I was no longer rebuilding. I was becoming. It started with a single post. A friend asked if I'd write a piece for her newsletter, about starting over, about motherhood, about finding your voice after betrayal. I wrote it one night. After Liam went to bed, didn't overthink it, didn't polish it for perfection, I just told the truth, and the truth landed. The post was shared, then reshared, then picked up by a larger platform. Within weeks I had an audience. Within months I had a brand. Women started writing to me. Mothers, daughters, divorcees, even college students. Saw myself in your story. You said what I didn't know I was allowed to feel. I didn't think I could leave, until I read your words. So I kept going, wrote more, spoke more, built a website, created workshops. I called it Unquiet, because silence had once been my shield. But now, my voice was my weapon. One morning, I opened my inbox and saw something that made me pause. An invitation, a National Women's Summit, keynote speaker slot available. Topic: how to rebuild when they think you're broken. I stared at it, then said yes. The event was 6 months away. I worked harder than ever, designed my talk, practiced every word, balanced my career with motherhood like a tightrope walker, imperfect but unshakably present. And as the date approached, I got word that my ex-husband's company, his family business, would be sponsoring one of the segments. The same man who had once told me, "You're lucky I provide the life I do. You wouldn't last a year on your own." He would be there, not in the audience during my speech, but nearby, close enough. I didn't flinch, because now I wasn't walking back into his world. He was walking into mine. The day of the summit, I stood backstage in a navy blue dress I bought with my own paycheck, my own power. Liam stayed with a sitter, but I carried his picture in my wallet right over my heart. As I walked onto the stage, the lights didn't scare me. The crowd didn't either, because I wasn't performing. I was telling the truth. I started with this. I thought betrayal would break me, but it just introduced me to the woman I'd been too afraid to meet. I told them everything, the camera, the hallway, the silence I left in place of a confrontation, but I didn't linger there. I spoke about the real fight, the mornings I had to build confidence from scratch, the jobs I took just to breathe, the guilt that clung like fog, the nights I felt like failure sat beside me, waiting for me to collapse, and then, how I didn't. I ended with this. There's nothing louder than a woman they expected to break, walking back into the room with her head held high, not to prove anything, but because she already did. The crowd stood before I finished. It wasn't about applause, it was about arrival. Afterward, I walked out into the hall, and there he was. He looked older, thinner, eyes dimmer than I remembered. He didn't approach, just watch me walk by. Maybe. He recognized the dress. Maybe he recognized the strength. But he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because that day, in the space between us, I finally felt no fear, no shame, no regret, no longing, just closure. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. That night I tucked Liam into bed and whispered, "You have no idea how much you saved me." He yawned. "Saved you from what?" I smiled. From becoming someone who stayed quiet about things that hurt. I looked around our apartment, newer now, better, brighter, the couch we picked together, the photos we hung, the shoes by the door that were only ours, and I thought, this is what revenge looks like. Not destruction, not bitterness, but peace. Peace they don't get to touch. It was a Tuesday, cold, grey, and otherwise unremarkable. Liam was building a Lego spaceship on the living room floor. I was answering emails halfway through a cup of lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something in me, call it instinct, call it closure, made me swipe. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in over a year. "Natalie, it's me." He didn't have to say his name. I knew it. That slight rasp when he said my name, the way his tone curled in guilt like it was still trying to charm its way into forgiveness. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything. He filled the silence. I've been following what you're doing. You're writing the summit. You look strong. That last word lingered, like he wanted credit for it. Like the strength he broke me into was somehow something he helped build. Sarah and I cut him off, I don't care. He exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath for months. I know, I've made mistakes, Natalie. I see that now. I think about you and Liam every day. There it was, the reel back, the what if. The call that comes not because they miss you, but because they miss the version of themselves you used to hold together. Would you consider meeting? Just to talk, maybe get closure. I looked at Liam, who was now humming softly, focused on snapping pieces into place. I smiled, not because I was tempted, but because I wasn't. No, I said calmly. I don't need closure from you. I already gave it to myself. He was quiet. I wasn't. You had your moment, and you used it to lie. I had mine, and I used it to rebuild. That's the difference. Another pause. I just thought you'd want to hear that I regret it. I don't need your regret, I said. I'm living with your consequences. Click. I ended the call, and I didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, but because it finally didn't control me. A few days later, I got a message from Sarah. Yes, her. It was short. I'm sorry. Truly. I lost more than I ever expected. I know you'll never forgive me. I just wanted you to know you were never the weak one I was. I read it twice, then deleted it. Not to erase it, but to let it die where it belonged, in the past. The next weekend, Liam and I went hiking, just the two of us. His backpack too big for his little shoulders, but he insisted on carrying it anyway. We sat on a rock overlooking a valley. He pointed to the trees below. Those look like broccoli. He laughed. I looked down at him. This little boy I'd carried through storm after storm, not because I had to, but because he was the only part of my story worth holding on to. You think we're going to be okay, Mum? He asked, suddenly serious. I kissed the top of his head. Baby, we already are. That night, as he slept, I sat at my desk and wrote the final chapter of my upcoming book. It ended with this line. Sometimes, the people who break you expect to be part of your healing, but healing is sacred, and not everyone deserves a seat at that table. 2 weeks later, a journalist interviewed me for a national podcast. At the end, she asked, "If you could say anything to the woman you were the day you watched that footage, what would it be?" I smiled and said, "Don't say a word, just gather your strength. One day they'll call, and you'll realise you don't owe them your voice. You're too busy using it for something bigger." Liam's first-grade teacher once told me, "Your son has this quiet strength. When other kids push, he doesn't push back. He plants his feet and waits." I smiled then. I didn't tell her he got that from me. Not the silence. Not the stubbornness, the stillness, the strength you only find when everything around you has crumbled and you decide not to. It had been almost 2 years since the day I walked away, from the house, from the marriage, from the version of me that thought being chosen meant being safe, and in those 2 years, I'd rebuilt not just my life, but something far more valuable, my sense of what love should look like. Every morning, I packed Liam's lunch with a handwritten note. Not long. Just a line. Be kind even when no one's watching. Strong people don't need to be loud. The truth never hurts as much as a lie pretending to protect. One day he asked, "Why do you write me these?" I knelt down, tied his sneakers, and said, "Because the world will try to teach you fast. I want to teach you right." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Sometimes I worried he'd remember the wrong things. The day we left. The boxes. The questions I couldn't answer without breaking. But as he grew, I realised children don't remember everything. They remember what's repeated, and what I'd repeated, day after day, was this. Love doesn't lie, and when it does, it doesn't get to stay. People asked if I'd ever date again. At first, I said no. Then maybe. Now, I don't think in terms of what I need to fill, I think in terms of what I've already built. If someone wants to stand beside that, great, but I no longer bend to be kept. One weekend, Liam had a school project. Who inspires you? He drew me, stick figure in a dress, holding a pen in one hand and his hand in the other. He titled it, My Mom Who Made a New Life. He stood in front of the class and read, My mum is brave because she left something that hurt, and now she helps other people not feel alone, and she still makes the best pancakes on Sundays. Everyone laughed. I cried, not the kind of tears I hid, the kind I let fall, because for the first time in my life I wasn't crying out of pain. I was crying because I had become someone worth looking up to. That night I tucked him in. He whispered, Do you think I'll be brave like you someday? I leaned down. You already are. Later, I opened my journal, the one I started the week I left, and flipped to the very first page. I read the words of a woman who thought her world had ended. Then I flipped to the last page and wrote, I didn't lose myself, I just hadn't met her yet. So here's what my son will inherit. Not bitterness, not suspicion, not fear, but truth. Love that doesn't come with conditions, strength that doesn't shout, and a mother who taught him that real. Power isn't in taking someone back, it's in never losing yourself again.